The year is 1893. Aston Villa have just paid £100 for Scottish forward Willie Groves. At the time, that transfer fee was considered extraordinary. Newspapers debated whether football had lost its mind. Let's fast forward more than 130 years. You see, today £100 can't even get you a Premier League match ticket. In 2017, Paris Saint-Germain would go on to pay €222 million to sign attacking superstar Neymar from Barcelona. A fee so large that many believed football had finally reached its limit. Surely, nobody could ever be worth more than that. But that's exactly what people said in 2009, when Cristiano Ronaldo would go on to move to Spanish giants Real Madrid for £80 million. And before that, in 1996, when Alan Shearer would go on to cost £15 million. And before that, when Trevor Francis became football's first £1 million player in 1979. Every generation thinks the latest transfer record is absurd, and every generation turns out to be wrong. So, why do transfer fees keep rising? Why are clubs willing to spend hundreds of millions on a single player? And if that trend continues, could football one day produce a £1 billion transfer? To answer this question, we need to understand something important. Football clubs don't buy players the way normal people buy things. Football clubs aren't simply paying for talent. They're paying for what that talent can generate. And that distinction explains almost everything. When fans hear that a player costs £100 million, the reaction is simple. Nobody is worth that much. And from a purely human perspective, they're absolutely right. But football clubs don't think like supporters. They think like businesses. Picture this. You're the owner of a top-flight club, and you go on to spend £100 million on a striker. The striker goes on to score loads of goals, and your club reaches the later stages of Europe's top competitions, like the Champions League. As a result, television revenue increases, and sponsors become increasingly more interested. Ticket demand rises, and the club's value increases. Suddenly, that £100 million fee looks less of an expense, more like an investment. Football transfers are essentially one big bet. A club is betting that a player's future impact will be worth more than the price paid today. The larger the football economy, the larger those payouts start to become. And that's exactly what's happened over the last century. To understand why football fees have exploded, we first need to understand what football used to look like. For most of football history, clubs weren't global brands. They were local businesses. The money came from one place: fans buying tickets. This was a time before television deals, streaming services, and worldwide audiences like we know today. If your stadium held 30,000 people, there was a limit to how much money you could make. And if there was a limit to how much money clubs could earn, there was also a limit to how much money they could spend. Television made football bigger. Globalization made it massive. Today, someone in London can support Barcelona. Someone in New York can support Newcastle. Someone in Jakarta can support Arsenal. Football clubs now have audiences spread across the entire planet. And that matters because global audiences generate global revenue. This means more shirt sales, more sponsors, more viewers. The most important part of all, more money. And that changes how players are valued. A superstar isn't just helping a club to win games anymore. They're helping that club to grow business. Neymar to Paris Saint-Germain. 222 million euros. Even by today's crazy standards, that number is staggering. But the most important thing wasn't the fee itself. It was what happened afterwards. The entire market adjusted. Selling clubs started demanding more, and those who were buying were willing to pay. Suddenly, £100 million transfer no longer felt impossible. The benchmark had moved overnight, and football has been living in the post-Neymar market ever since. Could football ever see a £1 billion transfer? Today, it sounds ridiculous. But so did £1 million, so did £10 million, and so did 100 million. History tells us that transfer fees tend to follow football's revenues. So if the sport keeps growing, transfer fees will probably keep growing as well. A £300 million transfer feels possible. A £500 million transfer feels realistic. A £1 billion transfer still feels a long way off. But if football's economy doubles again over the next few decades, this conversation might start sounding very different, because the next impossible transfer fee always seems impossible, right until somebody pays it.